Madeline Parker crossed the emptying office floor in 6 fast strides, dropped her designer bag onto Jordan Hayes's desk, and pressed both palms flat against the wood like the ground had just tilted underneath her. "I need a boyfriend tonight. You. Right now, and don't laugh." Jordan didn't laugh, though every instinct told him to, because the woman he had quietly loved for over a year had just asked him to walk into the richest family in Chicago and become a lie. What she didn't know was that he would say yes on one condition that would strip both their lives down to the truth and change everything. Before we begin, do me a favor, comment below and tell me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe a good man should never have to shrink himself to be loved, hit subscribe and follow this all the way to the end. The clock on the wall read 5:38, and Madeline Parker had not moved her hands off Jordan Hayes's desk. "Say something," she told him. "Anything. Yes would be my first choice." Jordan set down his pen with the kind of slowness a man uses when he's decided not to react too fast. Around them, the 42nd floor of Brennan Cole Architecture had gone quiet, the last of the deadline crowd, filing toward the elevators, coats over their arms, the weekend already in their voices. He and Madeline had been the two people who stayed late more nights than not. He knew the sound of this floor when it was empty. This was that sound. "You want to run that by me one more time," Jordan told her. "Slower, because from where I'm sitting it sounded like you asked me to be your boyfriend. Tonight. For one night." Madeline pushed a strand of hair off her face with the back of her wrist, and Jordan noticed her hand was shaking. Madeline Parker's hands did not shake. He'd watched this woman deliver a design pitch to a hostile client with 2 hours of sleep and a fever, and her hands had been steady as stone. "I know how it sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. I've had 4 minutes to think about it, and it sounds insane to me too." "Then let's start with what happened in the last 4 minutes. "My mother happened." Madeline laughed, and there was no humor anywhere in it. "My mother always happens." Jordan leaned back. The chair took his weight with a small complaint. He kept his voice level the way he'd learned to keep it level in rooms where getting loud cost more than staying calm ever did. "Sit down." "I don't have time to sit down." "You've got time to sit down for 30 seconds. Sit." Something in the plainness of it reached her. Madeline pulled the guest chair around to the side of his desk and dropped into it, knees together, bag clutched to her lap like a life preserver. Up close, the panic under her makeup was easier to see. She'd been crying or fighting not to. "My brother's engagement party is tonight," she told him. "At the house, the Winnetka house. Andrew and Claire. It's their night, it's supposed to be their night. 200 people, business people, my father's people. Half the board of the firm will be there, by the way, so keep that in your back pocket." "I'll do that. And Preston is going to be there." She said the name like she was setting something heavy down. "Preston Caldwell, my ex-fiancé. Except my mother doesn't use the word ex. My mother uses phrases like, 'the situation with Preston,' and 'once things settle down.' For 8 months, she has been orchestrating a reconciliation I never agreed to and never will agree to. She's seated us next to each other at 3 dinners. She accidentally invited him to my birthday. And tonight, she is going to stand up in front of 200 people and make some warm little speech about second chances, and Preston is going to be standing there with a look on his face like he already won, and I—" Madeline stopped. Her jaw tightened. "I told her I was seeing someone." Jordan let that sit in the air a moment. "When did you tell her that?" 3 weeks ago. In a moment of weakness and rage, which is my whole personality lately. She was going on about how Preston had matured, how he was ready now. And I said it. I said, "Actually, Mother, I'm seeing someone, it's going well, so you can retire the Preston campaign." And she went very quiet, which for her is a nuclear response. And then she said, "Wonderful, bring him to the party." "And you don't have a him." "I don't have a him." Madeline pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for a second, then dropped them. "I have you, sitting right here. The one person in my life who I know is not going to freeze up, not going to embarrass me, not going to get drunk and start telling my father's golf partners about the crypto thing. You're calm. You're smart. You already know half my life, because we've spent 2 years next to each other in this glass box. You know I hate my mother's phrase, our kind of people. You know I take my coffee like a war crime. You could sell it. You're the only person I know who could sell it. Jordan watched her. He had in fact spent 2 years next to her in this glass box. He knew a great deal more than she was crediting him with. He knew that when she laughed for real, her nose wrinkled, and when she laughed for a client, it didn't. He knew she stayed until 9 on Thursdays, not because the work required it, but because a junior designer named Priya was scared of a senior partner, and Madeline had appointed herself quietly as the person who happened to still be there. He knew she remembered the name of every security guard in the building and their kids' names, and that she'd sent an entire week of groceries to a coworker recovering from gallbladder surgery, and told the woman it was a firm benefit so she wouldn't feel like charity. He knew all of that. He'd been paying attention for longer than was probably wise. You want to know the real reason you picked me, Jordan told her. And I don't think it's the reason you just gave. Madeline's eyes came up sharp. It's exactly the reason I gave. You gave me a resume. Calm, smart, won't embarrass you. That's a hiring pitch. He kept his tone easy. I'm asking you why me and not one of the 12 guys who've been trying to take you to dinner since I've known you. You've got a whole bench, Madeline. Real bench. Guys with the right last names. Why is the fake boyfriend a black single dad from the South Side who took the red line here this morning? She flinched at that just slightly, and he watched her decide whether to be honest. Because with all of them, she said finally, I'd be performing. And I'm so tired of performing that I want to lie down on this carpet and not get up. With you, I don't... She stopped and started over more carefully. With you, I've never once had to be anybody. That's the truth. You want the whole truth. I picked you because standing next to you is the only place in my life I've ever felt like I could stop pretending. So it made a terrible kind of sense to ask you to help me pretend. The office had gone all the way quiet now. The last elevator had come and gone. It was just the two of them and the low hum of the building breathing. Jordan let out a slow breath. That's a better answer. So that's a yes. That's not a yes. He held up a hand before her face could fall. Not yet. I've got questions, and I've got a condition, and if you don't like the condition, then it's a no, and I still buy you a drink because it sounds like you need one. I need 11. Madeline sat forward. Ask your questions. Fast. We have to be in Winnetka in 90 minutes, and the traffic on the Edens will be biblical. First question. Jordan folded his hands on the desk. What happens to me at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, when the party's over and your mother's satisfied for a week, and you and I are back in this box across from each other for the next 2 years? What am I then? Madeline opened her mouth, closed it. You didn't think about that, Jordan said. I've been busy having a panic attack in a supply closet, so no, Jordan, I didn't game out our Q3. I need you to think about it now, because I'm not a costume you put on for a night and hang back in the closet. Whatever we do tonight, I still have to sit here. You still have to sit there. So we're not going to do anything tonight that either one of us has to be ashamed of Monday. She studied him, and something shifted in her expression. A kind of surprise, like she'd expected this to be easy, and had just discovered it wasn't going to be. Okay, she said slowly. Agreed. Nothing we're ashamed of Monday. What else? Second question. This Preston, is he going to come at me? Preston is going to smile at you and shake your hand and ask you where you summered, Madeline said. And then he is going to spend the entire night finding elegant ways to make you feel like you don't belong in that house. That's his gift. He never raises his voice. He'll just locate the exact soft spot and press on it while everyone admires his manners. Her mouth twisted. He's very good at it. He made me smaller for 2 years, and I thanked him for it. And your family. They going to come at me too? My mother will be perfectly polite, Madeline said, in the way that a knife is perfectly clean. My Uncle Gerald will say something you'll want to hit him for, and I'll want to hit him for, and neither of us will, because it's Andrew's night. My father won't say much of anything, which is its own thing. And there will be 190 strangers who are going to look at us, walk in together, and do math. She held his gaze. She didn't look away from it, and he gave her credit for that. I'm not going to insult you by pretending you don't know what math I mean. No, Jordan said. I know the math. I hate that you have to know the math. I've known it my whole life, Madeline. It's the oldest arithmetic there is. He said it without heat. He'd made peace long ago with saying true things in a plain voice. The heat never helped, and the truth didn't need it. So here's my condition. And it's the only one, and it's not negotiable. And if you can't give it to me, then we shake hands, and you go find somebody with the right last name. Madeline set her bag down on the floor. For the first time since she'd walked over, she gave him her whole attention, both feet flat, spine straight, like she understood the next thing out of his mouth mattered. Tell me, if I walk into that house as your boyfriend, Jordan said, you introduce the real me, all of it. I'm a single father. I have an 8-year-old daughter named Ava, and she is the entire center of my life, not a footnote to it, not a complication. You leave off the story to make me an easier sell. You don't upgrade my background. You don't turn community college into somewhere it wasn't. You don't leave out that I lost my wife. And he leaned forward now and here, his voice did drop, not soft, but weighted. If anybody in that house treats me like I don't belong there, you don't stay quiet. You don't look at your shoes. You don't laugh it off to keep the night smooth. You stand next to what you brought in the door. That's the condition. You want a boyfriend for the night, fine. But he comes as himself and you defend him or there's no deal. Madeline was quiet for a long moment. You've thought about this before, she said. This exact speech. You've had it loaded. I've had it loaded my whole life, Jordan said. You just happen to be the first person I've ever pointed it at. Why? Because I like you. He said it flat, no flourish the way you'd state a fact about the weather. I've liked you longer than is smart. And a man who likes somebody has two options. He can hide it and be useful and hope they notice. Or he can tell the truth and let them decide with all the information. I'm too old for the first one. So that's my card face up. If you want me tonight, you get all of me and Ava and the whole story and no editing. If that's too much, I understand, and Monday we never talk about this again. He watched her absorb it. He watched honestly for the flicker he'd seen on faces before the quick recalculation, the pulling back, the polite version of no. He'd have understood it. He'd braced for it. It didn't come. What came instead was Madeline Parker, sitting very still, and then laughing. The real one, the one where her nose wrinkled, and then to his surprise her eyes filling. You're unbelievable, she said. I come over here to ask you for a favor, and you turn it into the most honest conversation I've had in a year. She wiped under her eye with one finger, careful of the makeup. Yes, yes to all of it. Ava, the real story. All of it. And I'll defend you. She said the last part, slowly weighing it, and then again firmer, like she was making herself a promise as much as him. I'll defend you. In front of my mother. In front of Preston. In front of all of them. You have my word, and my word is worth more than my family thinks it is. Jordan held her eyes another second, taking her measure, and decided she meant it. Okay, he said. Then we've got a deal. And we've got rules. Of course we have rules. She almost smiled. You've probably got those loaded too. Rule 1. We don't invent anything we don't have to. No fake trips to Positano. No, we met at a gala. We met at work, we've known each other 2 years. That's all true. We lean on what's true. A lie is easiest to keep when it's mostly not a lie. That's actually good tradecraft. Rule 2. We don't oversell the romance. Nobody buys the couple that can't keep their hands off each other. They buy the couple that finishes each other's sentences. So we keep it quiet, comfortable, like people who've stopped performing for each other, which... He allowed himself a small, dry look. Given the circumstances, shouldn't be a stretch. And Rule 3, Madeline asked. Rule 3 is about the hands. No touching unless you start it. Not because I'm being a gentleman about it, though I am. Because the second I put a hand on your back in that house, every eye in the room reads it as a black man being familiar with a Parker, and I'm not handing anybody that. You decide when we touch. You control it. You reach for my hand. I'm there. I don't reach first. Clear. Madeline was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, something between admiration and grief. You've had to think about all of this, she said quietly, just to walk into a party. Every day of my life is a version of thinking about all of this. You're just seeing it out loud for once. He stood, took his jacket off the back of the chair and shrugged into it. Now. We've got a stop to make before Winnetka, and it's not optional either. Jordan, we do not have time for a stop. We're making it anyway. He checked his phone, and something in his face softened in a way it hadn't all conversation. My daughter's at my sister's tonight. Denise's place, it's 15 minutes. It's on the way if we take Ashland. Ava made me something today, and she's been texting my sister every 20 minutes to make sure I come get it before I go to the fancy party. Her words. He pocketed the phone. I'm not going to be the dad who didn't stop. Not for your mother, not for 200 people, not for anybody. So we stop. 5 minutes. You can wait in the car. You can Madeline gathered her bag off the floor and stood. I'm not waiting in the car. You don't have to come in. If I'm going to spend the night telling 200 people that your daughter is the center of your life, and that I know it and respect it, Madeline said, then it's going to be a little hard to do that convincingly if I've never laid eyes on the child. Wouldn't you say? She squared her shoulders. I'll come in. If she's there. Is that okay? I don't want to just barge into your kid's night. Jordan looked at her for a beat. He hadn't expected her to ask. Most people didn't ask. Yeah, he said. It's okay. Come on. The drive to Denise's went through the gray last light of a Chicago Friday, and for the first 10 minutes, Madeline said nothing at all, which for Madeline was a small miracle. You're quiet, Jordan told her hands at 10 and 2, watching the traffic thicken ahead of them. I'm rehearsing, she said. I'm running the room. Who's going to say what? Where the landmines are? She turned toward him. Can I ask you something and you don't have to answer it? Ask. Your wife. Madeline said it carefully, like stepping onto ice. You don't talk about her. 2 years I know your coffee order. I know you played ball in high school. I know you can fix the copier when IT can't. I don't know her name. Jordan was quiet for the length of a red light. Nia, he said. Her name was Nia. She was a pediatric nurse. She could make a screaming kid laugh in about 11 seconds. It was a genuine superpower. A small private smile touched his mouth and then went. Cancer. Ava was 4. It was fast, which everybody tells you is a mercy, and it isn't. It just means you don't get to say the things you meant to say. One day she was tired, and 3 months later, I was standing in a funeral home picking out a program. The light went green. He drove. That was 4 years ago. I don't talk about it because there's no short version and people want a short version. They want you to be okay by dessert. I won't ask you to be okay by dessert, Madeline said. I know you won't. He glanced at her. That's part of why I said yes if you want to know. She let that sit. How does Ava do? She asked. With it. Better than me most days. She was young enough that Nia's more of a feeling than a memory, and that's its own kind of hard. She'll ask me a question sometimes that comes out of nowhere. Did Mommy like thunderstorms? And I have to catch my breath before I answer because I want to get it right. I owe her the right answer every time. His jaw worked. She's smarter than me. Watches everybody. She's got this thing she does. She can tell inside about a minute whether somebody actually respects me or is just being polite to my face. I don't know where she learned it. I sure didn't teach it to her. Kids learn what they live around, Madeline said quietly. Yeah, that's what worries me. Jordan turned onto Denise's street. So I'll tell you now before we go up there because it matters. Ava's going to look at you. She's going to take your whole measure in about 60 seconds, and whatever she decides, she'll be right. She usually is. He pulled to the curb and put the car in park and turned to face her fully. So don't perform for her. Whatever you do tonight in that big house, don't do it up here. She'll know. Just be whoever you actually are. That's all I ask. Madeline looked up at the third-floor windows of the walk-up warm and yellow against the coming dark, and Jordan watched something cross her face that he didn't have a name for. I'm more nervous about this than the party, she admitted. Good, Jordan said, and got out of the car. Means you understand the stakes. Denise Hayes opened the door before Jordan finished knocking, took one look at Madeline standing behind her brother, and lifted an eyebrow so high it nearly left her face. Well, Denise said, this is not what you told me on the phone. I didn't tell you anything on the phone, Denise. Exactly. Denise stepped back to let them in her eyes, doing a full lap of Madeline the bag, the shoes the whole of her with the frank, unhurried assessment of a woman who had raised her little brother as much as their mother had, and had appointed herself gatekeeper of his heart around the same time. Ava's in the kitchen. She's been vibrating for an hour. Jordan, a word. She hooked a thumb toward the hall. In private, won't take a minute. Jordan glanced at Madeline. You okay for a second? I'll survive, Madeline said, though her knuckles had gone white on the bag strap. Denise pulled her brother 3 steps down the hall and dropped her voice, though not by much. Who is she, and why is she dressed like the cover of a magazine that costs $11? It's a work thing. I'm doing her a favor. It's complicated and we've got no time, so. A work thing. Denise crossed her arms. Jordan Isaiah Hayes, I have watched you not date one single soul in 4 years. 4 years. And now there's a woman on my doorstep who I'm pretty sure I've seen in a business magazine, and you want me to believe it's a work thing. She narrowed her eyes. You look at her different. I clocked it in 1 second flat. Don't argue with me. Denise, I'm not saying anything's wrong. I'm saying be careful. That girl's world will chew you up and hand you back the bones and tell you it's your own fault for walking in. I've seen it. Mama saw it. You know what I'm talking about. She softened and put a hand flat on his chest over the heart. You're a good man, and Ava needs her daddy in one piece. That's the whole speech. Go get your girl her bracelet before she explodes. Jordan covered his sister's hand with his own. I hear you. I do. He meant it. But she asked me a real question today, and I gave her a real answer, and now we're both in it. So watch this one for me tonight, would you? From over here? Denise studied him a beat. I always do, she said. Go on. Back in the front room. Madeline had not moved, and she was watching a small figure come around the corner from the kitchen. A girl in a purple sweatshirt with 2 neat braids, and her father's careful, watchful eyes, holding something in both hands like it was made of glass. Ava stopped when she saw the stranger. She looked at Madeline. She looked at her father. She looked at Madeline again. Hi, Ava said, cautious. Hi, Madeline said back. Jordan crouched down. Hey baby, this is Madeline. She's a friend from my work. We're going to that party together tonight, remember I told you? He held out his hand. You got something for me. But Ava didn't hand it to him. She kept it, and she kept studying Madeline, and then to Jordan's quiet surprise, because he knew his daughter, and this was not usual. Ava walked past his outstretched hand and stopped directly in front of the woman she'd never met. I made it for my dad, Ava said, and opened her hands. In them lay a bracelet, a homemade thing of blue and white beads on stretchy cord, a little uneven, a couple of the letters on the alphabet beads facing the wrong way. It says Dad. This one's backwards, but I ran out so I left it. It's for good luck at the fancy party, so people are nice to him. Madeline did not glance at Jordan for a cue. She did not say something bright and adult and empty. Instead, she lowered herself down all the way down in the expensive dress onto Denise's front room floor, so she was level with the girl, and looked at the bracelet like it was the most important object in Chicago. Can I see it? Madeline asked. Ava placed it in her palm. The backwards one is my favorite, Madeline said, turning it in the light. You know why? Because it means you didn't stop when it went wrong. You just kept going and finished it anyway. That's the hardest thing in the whole world to do, and you did it, and you were 8. She handed it back gently. Your dad's very lucky. Ava considered this with the gravity of a judge. Then she slid the bracelet onto her father's wrist herself, working it over his hand, tugging it into place, and Jordan held still and let her, and something in his throat went tight. There, Ava announced. Now people have to be nice. That's how it works, huh? Jordan managed. That's how it works. Ava turned back to Madeline, and here it came. Jordan felt it coming the way you feel. Weather. His daughter tilted her head and looked up at this woman on the floor in the beautiful dress, and asked the question that only a child would ask straight out. Are you really his girlfriend? The room went still. Denise in the kitchen doorway went still. Jordan went still because he had no idea what Madeline was going to say, and because whatever she said, Ava would know if it was true. Madeline looked at the little girl. She did not look at Jordan for rescue. She thought about it. Jordan could see her thinking about it, could see her turning over every version of an answer, the easy lie and the easy dodge and the empty grown-up nothing. And then she set all of them down and reached for the only thing his daughter would accept. "Tonight," Madeline said, "I'm trying to be." Ava studied her a long moment. Nobody in the room breathed. Then Ava nodded, slow and grave, the way she did when something added up. "Okay," she said. And to her father, as if delivering a verdict, she didn't lie. "No," Jordan said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "No, baby, she didn't." Madeline rose off the floor, smoothing the dress, and for just a second, she pressed the back of her hand to the corner of her eye, quick before anyone could be sure she'd needed to. "We have to go," she said. "The party. We're going to be late." "Yeah." Jordan touched the bracelet on his wrist, the backwards letter facing up at him. "Yeah, we should go." He knelt and pulled Ava into a hug, and held her a beat longer than the situation called for, his eyes closing. "Be good for Aunt Denise. I'll be here in the morning first thing. Pancakes." "Chocolate chip." "Chocolate chip. Deal." He kissed the top of her head, breathed her in once, and stood at the door. Denise caught Madeline's arm, not hard, but enough to stop her, and looked at her with those same measuring eyes she'd used on the doorstep, except something in them had moved. "You got down on the floor for her," Denise said quietly, just for the two of them. "Grown folks don't do that. They stand up there and talk down at her like she's a puppy. You got on the floor." She let go. "I don't know what tonight is. I don't know what you two are. But you got on the floor for my niece, and that counts for something with me. So." She stepped back. "Take care of my brother out there. He acts like a fortress. He's not one." Madeline held the older woman's gaze. "I gave him my word," she said. "I keep my word." "We'll see," Denise said, but not unkindly. Down on the sidewalk, the streetlights had come on. Jordan opened the car door for Madeline, and she stopped before getting in one hand on the frame and looked back up at the third-floor windows at the small silhouette that had appeared in one of them to wave. Madeline waved back. She waved until the silhouette disappeared. Then she got in the car, and Jordan came around and got in beside her, and for a moment, neither of them started anything. "She's going to know," Madeline said, finally staring straight ahead. "Isn't she? If tonight goes badly. If I flinch when your uncle says something and I don't stand up for you, she'll know. She'll know before you tell her." "She'll know," Jordan said. "Then I can't flinch." "No," Jordan agreed. He turned the key and the engine came to life, and the backwards D on his wrist caught the light of the dash. "You can't." Madeline pulled the seatbelt across herself and buckled it, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, the panic gone out of it, replaced by something harder and steadier, something Jordan hadn't heard from her before. "Then let's go," she said. "And let's not flinch." Jordan pulled the car out into the street and pointed it north toward Winnetka, toward the house full of people already doing math. And neither of them said another word for a long time. But somewhere between the walk-up and the highway, the thing they were driving toward had stopped being a favor and started being the truth about to catch up with them both. The Parker estate sat behind a gate that opened before Jordan even slowed the car, as if the house had been expecting them, and was mildly disappointed they were late. He put the car in the hands of a valet, who took his keys without quite looking at him. And then he came around and offered Madeline his arm, and she took it, and they walked up the long lit drive toward 200 people and a set of open doors that spilled warm light and string music out into the dark. "Last chance to run," Jordan murmured. "Parkers don't run." Madeline's chin came up. "We stand in the doorway and let everyone look. It's a whole tradition. And here I forgot my running shoes." That got a real laugh out of her, small and quick, and it was still on her face when they crossed the threshold. Which was good, Jordan thought, because the room turned to look at them, the way she'd promised it would, and a woman laughing is harder to pity. The turning wasn't loud. That was the thing about it. Nobody gasped. Nobody pointed. It was quieter and worse than that. A ripple of heads, a half-second of conversations catching a dozen glances that touched Jordan and moved to Madeline and did the arithmetic and moved on all of it under a polished surface of smiles. He had walked into rooms like this his whole life. He knew the exact temperature of it. "Breathe," he told her low. "You're doing the doorway thing. I hate the doorway thing." But her hand tightened on his arm, and she let him in. They didn't make it 10 feet before a woman in ivory silk detached herself from a cluster near the staircase and came toward them with her arms already half open, and Jordan knew before Madeline's spine went rigid that this was the mother. "There you are." Victoria Parker kissed the air beside her daughter's cheek, once on each side, a maneuver executed without ever quite making contact. "We'd nearly given you up. Andrew's been asking." Only then did she turn to Jordan, and the smile she gave him was flawless and cost her nothing and warmed exactly none of her face. "And you must be the mystery. Madeline's told us so little, almost nothing really. Jordan Hayes." He offered his hand, and Victoria took it for the minimum interval that counted as taking it. "It's a beautiful home, Mrs. Parker. Thank you for having me." "Yes, well, we couldn't very well not, could we, once Madeline announced you existed?" Victoria's eyes did a single unhurried pass over him. The suit, which was good, but not the kind of good that had a name sewn into it. The shoes, the whole of him, and Jordan let her look, because there was nothing else to do with a look like that, but let it happen. "Hayes. I don't believe I know the Hayeses." "I don't believe you do know." "And what is it you do, Mr. Hayes?" "Mother." Madeline's voice had an edge to it. "Jordan and I work together. Senior operations analyst. He's the reason the Kellerman project didn't collapse in the spring. If you were wondering, though, I doubt Father mentioned it since the partners took the credit." "How industrious." Victoria's smile did not move. "And I understand you have a child." "A daughter, Ava. She's 8. Victoria let the sound sit there, small and complete, a whole verdict compressed into a single syllable. "How full your hands must be. A career and a little girl, and no." She tilted her head, delicate as a blade. "No partner in it until now. However do you manage to keep up?" And there it was. Jordan thought the first press on the first soft spot exactly as Madeline had promised, wrapped so neatly in courtesy that a man could bleed from it and be expected to thank her for the bandage. "Ava's not something I keep up with, Mrs. Parker," Jordan said, easy, unbothered, meeting the woman's eyes and holding them. "She's not a weight on one side of a scale and my life on the other. She's the center. Everything else arranges itself around her. So I don't keep up with my daughter. I keep up with everything else so I don't miss any of her." For just a flicker, something crossed Victoria's face. Not warmth, nothing so generous, but a recalibration, the look of a person who'd expected the ball to go one way and watched it go another. She hadn't planned for him to answer plainly. People like her, Jordan had learned, counted on you flinching. The flinch was the whole game. When you didn't give it to them, they had to find a new move, and finding a new move took a second, and in that second, you could see the machinery. "How poetic," Victoria said, finally recovering. "Madeline, your brother. Go. He's by the terrace doors." And she drifted off toward another cluster, another cheek, to not quite kiss, leaving the two of them standing in the wake of her perfume. "You okay?" Madeline murmured. "I'm fine." "You're not fine, she just—" "Madeline." Jordan turned so he was facing her, blocking the room out for a second, just the two of them. "I've been getting that my whole life from people a lot less polished than your mother. I'm fine. But I want you to notice something." He held her eyes. "You corrected her. About the Kellerman project. You didn't let her call me industrious like I mop floors. That was you keeping your word first 2 minutes in the door. I saw it. Just so you know, I saw it." Madeline blinked and something in her face steadied. "That was easy," she said. "That was true. Wait till it costs me something." "It'll cost you something. Night's young." He offered his arm again. "Let's go meet your brother before somebody else has a poem for me." Andrew Parker turned out to be the first easy thing in the house. A tall, tired-eyed man with his sister's coloring and none of his mother's frost, who shook Jordan's hand like he meant it and pulled Madeline into a hug that actually landed. "You came," Andrew said into her hair. "I owe Claire $50. I bet her you'd bail." He held his sister at arm's length. "And you brought reinforcements. Good. You're going to need them. Mom's got a whole thing planned. She's been insufferable all week." He turned to Jordan. Andrew, thank you for walking into this. Genuinely. I know what this house is. My fiancé cried in the car on the way here, and she's marrying into it on purpose. Congratulations on the engagement, Jordan said, for what it's worth. It's worth a lot in here, actually. Sanity's the rarest thing in the building. Andrew lowered his voice. Listen, Mads. Preston's here. He's over by the bar being charming at Dad. Just heads up. Mom sat him at our table. Madeline's face changed. She what? I tried. I moved these cards myself an hour ago. She moved them back. It's her house, it's my party, and somehow it's still her table. Andrew grimaced. I'm sorry. I did try. It's fine, Madeline said in the voice of a woman for whom it was not fine. It's completely fine. Jordan and I are delightful dinner company, aren't we, Jordan? Charming, Jordan agreed. We rehearsed. But the ease went out of the evening after that, because now there was a shape to it, a table with Preston Caldwell already seated at it, waiting, and everything between the front door and that table was just the walk to the thing that had been arranged. They didn't get to sit right away. There was a receiving line's worth of relatives to move through, and each one was its own small weather system. An aunt who asked Jordan with a bright empty smile how he and Madeline had found each other, in a tone that suggested she was picturing an app and disapproving of it. A cousin who talked to Jordan for 4 minutes exclusively about basketball, having apparently landed on it as the safest available topic, and who seemed faintly startled when Jordan mentioned he actually followed architecture podcasts on his commute. A silver-haired man who shook his hand warmly, and then still holding it, asked which of the catering companies he was with, and whose face, when Madeline said crisply that Jordan was her guest. Not her staff did a thing that Jordan filed away, and Madeline clearly filed away harder. That was Uncle Gerald's business partner, she muttered as they moved off. I'm going to burn this house down. You're keeping count, Jordan observed. I can see you keeping count. Don't. It'll wear you out before dinner, and dinner's the main event. How are you not keeping count? Because I stopped keeping count a long time ago, or I'd have driven myself into the ground. He said it lightly, but it wasn't a light thing, and she heard the weight under it. You learn to let the small ones pass through you. You save yourself for the ones that matter. That man thought I parked cars. In an hour, I won't remember his face. But if somebody tries to make you smaller tonight, that one I'll remember. That's the one I'm here for. Madeline looked at him for a second longer than she needed to. You keep doing that, she said. Doing what? Turning this around. I brought you here to protect me from my mother's matchmaking, and you keep... She gestured helpless. Worrying about me. You're supposed to be the fake one. The prop. You're the least prop-like person I've ever met. Yeah, well. Jordan looked out over the room at the string quartet, at the chandeliers, at all of it. I don't know how to be a prop. Nobody ever gave me the option. Come on. Let's go sit down at the worst table in America. Preston Caldwell rose when they reached the table, because Preston Caldwell always did the correct thing at the correct moment, and he extended his hand to Jordan with a smile that could have sold anything to anyone. You must be the famous Jordan. Preston's grip was firm and warm, and lasted exactly as long as manners required. Preston Caldwell, old friend of the family. I've heard so much. Well, no, that's a lie. I've heard almost nothing. Which around here means you're either very new or very interesting. Sit, please. Jordan Hayes. He sat. Madeline sat beside him, close her knee, finding his under the table, the first touch she'd initiated all night. And Jordan understood it wasn't affection. It was an anchor, hers as much as his. Good to meet you, Preston. And you. Preston settled back into his chair with the ease of a man who owned the room and was graciously letting others use it. So, Jordan, tell me everything. Where'd you go to school? Started at Malcolm X College, Jordan said. City College on the west side. Finished my degree at UIC nights while I worked days. UIC, good school, good school. Preston nodded warmly, and Jordan watched him bank it, file it, sharpen it. Working your way through, that's admirable, truly. Not everyone gets handed the ladder, and the ones who build their own always seem to have a better story. He smiled. And clubs. Any clubs. Half of what I know about anybody I learned in a locker room. God help me. You a Union League man, Standard Club. I coach my daughter's rec basketball team on Saturdays, Jordan said. That's about the only club that'll have me. The table's other occupants, an older couple, some cousin of Andrew's, and her husband laughed politely, and Jordan let them, because he'd said it plainly and without a scrap of shame. And he watched Preston's smile hold, and something behind it, not hold at all. Preston had thrown a question meant to open a gap between them, and Jordan had walked straight through it instead of falling in. A coach, Preston said. Wonderful. Kids need that. And forgive me, I'm nosy. It's my worst quality. Do you own? Around the city, property's the only thing worth talking about at these things. Everything else is just weather. Preston? Madeline's voice was flat. It's a fine question, Jordan said before she could shield him, because he didn't want to be shielded from this one. This one, he could carry himself. I rent. 2-bedroom in Bronzeville. Ava's got the bigger room. I've got the one that used to be the office. I put every extra dollar into her college fund and a rainy day account because I lost my wife 4 years ago, and I learned the hard way that rainy days come, whether you saved for them or not. He kept his voice level and his eyes on Preston's. So no, I don't own, not yet. But my daughter's never once gone to bed scared, and there's no mortgage on that. The table went quiet. The cousin's husband looked at his plate. Preston's smile finally slipped just at the corners, just for a moment, because he'd reached for a soft spot and found bedrock, and there was nowhere for the pressure to go. I'm sorry, Preston said, and for a half second it almost sounded real. About your wife. I didn't know. No reason you would. Jordan reached for his water. It's not on my resume. Madeline's knee pressed harder against his under the table. When he glanced at her, her eyes were bright and furious, and fixed on Preston, and he could feel her deciding something. Dinner arrived, and with it a fresh terrain of small cuts. Uncle Gerald. The actual Uncle Gerald. Seated 2 chairs down, a florid man with an opinion for every silence leaned across when the conversation lulled and fixed Jordan with the beam of a man about to be generous. Operations Madeline said at the firm. Gerald buttered a roll with vigor. Good steady work, operations. Somebody's got to keep the lights on while the visionaries visioneer. Hey, what is that day to day? You're the fellow make sure the deliveries come and the copiers work. Keep the trains running. Uncle Gerald, Madeline started. Something like that, Jordan said. Last quarter one of those trains was a $40 million logistics failure on the Kellerman development. 3 subcontractors. 2 states, a supply chain that fell apart the week the steel prices spiked. The visionaries, as you put it, were about 6 days from watching the whole project default. He set his fork down unhurried. I built the recovery plan. Renegotiated the vendor contracts, restructured the delivery sequence, found $9 million in dead cost. Nobody had looked at. The project came in on time. So yes, I keep the trains running. Some of those trains are worth $40 million. Gerald blinked. Well, that's quite a bit more than copiers. It usually is, Jordan said. And here Madeline did the thing that changed the night, though neither of them knew it yet. She set down her wine glass, turned to the table at large, and said clearly into the little silence. You want to know the part that's actually interesting, Uncle Gerald? He did all that, and then 2 senior partners stood up in the board meeting and presented it as their own. Jordan's name wasn't in the deck. It wasn't in the memo to the client. He saved the entire quarter, and the men who took the bows have never worked a night in their lives that they weren't paid triple to work. Her voice didn't rise, but everyone at the table had gone still. I sat in that meeting. I watched it happen. And I said nothing because I was new to that room, and I was scared of it, and I've been ashamed of my silence ever since. The table stared. Jordan stared. Because this she had never told him. He'd known his work got taken. He hadn't known she'd been in the room. He hadn't known she'd watched it and carried it. Madeline, he said low just for her. You never told me you were there. I know. Her eyes came to his, and there was real grief in them. I know I didn't. I've been carrying it for 4 months, and I couldn't figure out how to say it. I admired how calm you always were, and I never once let myself see that the calm was covering something they were doing to you right in front of me, and I let it happen. I'm sorry. I should have said something that day. I'm saying it now at the worst possible table, which is very on brand for me. For a moment, the whole performance fell away. The fake relationship, the watching relatives, all of it, and it was just the two of them looking at each other across a plate of food they weren't eating, and something true passed between them that neither had planned to let out in this house. Preston watched it happen. Jordan saw him watch it, saw the man clock the realness of it, and not like it one bit, because you couldn't compete with a thing like that, couldn't out-charm it or out-property it. Well, Preston said lightly, reaching for the wine, reasserting himself into the quiet. That's the corporate world for you. The credit flows uphill, always has. He smiled at Jordan, and the smile had cooled by several degrees. Though I'd gently suggest, Jordan, that a man who lets his work get taken twice has to ask himself whether he's advocating hard enough for himself. No offense meant. Just the squeaky wheel and all that. No offense taken, Jordan said. But I'd gently suggest back that there's a difference between not advocating and not being heard. I've done plenty of squeaking, Preston. Some rooms are built so certain wheels don't make noise no matter how hard they turn. He let that land. You've probably never been in one of those rooms. On the wrong side of it, I mean. It's a different piece of engineering than you think. Preston's jaw tightened, and he didn't answer, and the cousin's husband suddenly found something fascinating in his water glass. The evening might have found its equilibrium there, a cold truce over a cooling dinner, except that partway through the main course, Victoria appeared at the head of the table, with the practiced glide of a woman who timed her entrances, and she rested one manicured hand on the back of Madeline's chair, and leaned down close, dropping her voice to the register she reserved for daughters and staff. Madeline, a word. Victoria's eyes cut sideways to Jordan, then back. In private. Whatever you want to say, Mother, you can say at the table. I'd really rather... At the table. Madeline didn't move. Jordan and I don't have secrets. Victoria's smile thinned to almost nothing, and she straightened, and when she spoke she pitched it, just quiet enough to seem discreet, and just loud enough to be heard. Very well. I only wanted to say, darling, that I understand the appeal of a change. I do. After Preston. After everything, I understand wanting something that feels like your own choice. But a man with this many obligations. Her gaze flicked delicate and unmistakable, and everyone understood the word. Obligations was doing two jobs at once. A man with a child, a household, a whole other life, already built and grieving in it. That's not a fresh start, Madeline. That's a burden you'd be signing up to carry. And you've worked too hard, and you're worth too much to spend yourself carrying someone else's. Don't. Madeline said it quietly, but it stopped Victoria cold, and it stopped the table, and 2 chairs down Uncle Gerald put down his roll. Don't finish that sentence, Mother. Madeline rose from her chair slowly, so that she was standing eye to eye with the woman who'd raised her. You were about to call Ava a burden, his daughter. You were going to stand in your own dining room at your son's engagement and call an 8-year-old child a burden in a nice enough voice that everyone could pretend you didn't. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Ava is not an obligation. She's not baggage. She's not a complication I'm too good for. She's his daughter, and she made him a good luck bracelet tonight, so that people in this house would be kind to him, and it's on his wrist right now. Show her, Jordan. Show her the bracelet. Jordan, his throat tight, turned his wrist so the blue and white beads showed the backwards D facing up. An 8-year-old made that so strangers would be nice to her father. Madeline went on, because she already knew somehow that they might not be. That's the kind of child you just called a burden. And I'll tell you what I should have told you months ago in front of everyone, since you wanted it at the table. She drew a breath. If you disrespect her, you disrespect me. If you can't find one gracious thing to say about the man I walked in with, then you can find your own daughter a seat at some other table, because I won't sit at one where the price of admission is agreeing that a good father and his little girl are beneath us. The silence after that was total. Somewhere across the ballroom, the string quartet kept playing oblivious, sawing away at something bright and baroque, and it made the quiet at the table louder. Victoria's face had gone very still. 2 spots of color stood out high on her cheeks. You're making a scene, she said finally, barely moving her lips. No, Mother, Madeline said. I'm ending one. There's a difference. You've been staging this scene for 8 months and I just walked off the set. And that was the moment Jordan would think about it later. Would turn it over many times. That was the exact moment the thing he was doing stopped being a favor. Because Madeline had done it. In front of her mother, in front of Preston, in front of 200 people doing math. She had stood up and put her whole body between him and the room, and she had done it not for the performance, and not to win a point against Preston, but because she meant it, because somewhere between the office and this table, it had become true. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He almost ignored it. Every instinct in that charged breath-held moment said, stay in this, don't move. But it buzzed again, and a third time, insistent the pattern he'd assigned to exactly one number, and his stomach dropped the way a parent's stomach drops. I'm sorry, he said, already rising. I have to, it's Ava. I have to take this. I was up and moving toward the terrace doors before anyone answered phone to his ear, the party blurring past him. Ava baby, what's wrong? Daddy. Her voice was thin and frightened and 8 years old. The lights went out. There was a really big thunder, and all the lights went out at Aunt Denise's, and it's really dark and I don't like it. When's the storm gonna stop? Is your party almost done? Hey, I'm here. Jordan pushed through the doors onto the cold, empty terrace away from all of them, and dropped his voice into the low, even register he used only for her, the one that had talked her down from 100 small terrors. I'm right here, baby. It's just the power. It's just a storm. Aunt Denise is right there with you, isn't she? She's getting the candles. Good. Candles are the best part, actually. You know what your mom used to do when the power went out? He leaned on the stone railing, eyes closed, the cold air on his face. She'd make us do shadow puppets on the wall. Terrible ones. Her dog looked like a duck every single time. You want to do shadow puppets till the lights come back. A wet little laugh came down the line. Did Mommy really do that? Every time. Swear to God. Ask Aunt Denise, she'll tell you. His chest ached, and he kept his voice steady through it, because she needed steady, and she would get steady, always, whatever it cost him. The storm's going to pass, baby. They always do. You're safe. You're the safest girl in Chicago, and I'm coming to get you first thing in the morning, and we're making chocolate chip pancakes. Chocolate chip pancakes. That's my girl. Now go help Aunt Denise with the candles and be brave and text me when the lights come back. So I know, okay. Text me the second they do. Okay, Daddy, I love you. I love you more. To the moon and the whole way back. Go on. He ended the call and stood there a moment in the cold, letting his heart come back down out of his throat, one hand still braced on the railing. And it was only then, in the quiet, that he heard the voices carrying out through the cracked terrace door behind him, from just inside, low and urgent. Victoria. And Madeline. Have any idea what you looked like just now? His mother's voice hissing. Standing up, making declarations over a man you've known how long, really, in the way that counts. A man with a whole life, already spent, a dead wife and a child and a rented apartment on the south side, Madeline. I am trying to protect you. You're trying to control me. You've always confused the two. Madeline's voice hard and clear. And I want you to hear something, Mother, and I want you to hear it precisely because I'm only saying it once. Jordan went still. He knew he should move, should announce himself, should not be standing in the dark listening. He didn't move. Ava is not an obligation, Madeline said, and her voice didn't waver at all now. She is his daughter, and if you disrespect her, you disrespect me. That's not a threat, Mother. That's just the new arrangement. Get used to it or lose me. Those are the options. Through the gap in this door. In the cold, with his daughter's frightened voice still warm in his ear, and his daughter's crooked bracelet on his wrist. Jordan heard her say, it hurt her keep the one condition he'd given her when she thought no one was listening, when there was no room to play to, and no point to score, when it cost her the only mother she had. He looked down at the backwards D on his wrist, catching the light from the doorway, and for a long moment, he didn't trust himself to go back inside. When Jordan finally went back inside, he found Madeline standing alone near the terrace doors, arms crossed tight over herself, and Victoria gone. Madeline's eyes came to him fast, searching his face. Ava, she said. Is she okay? What happened? Power's out at my sister's. Storm knocked it out. She got scared of the dark. He let a breath go. She's okay now. We did shadow puppets over the phone. She's fine. Shadow puppets. Something moved across Madeline's face, soft and stricken. God, Jordan. It's what her mom used to do. He watched her. You okay? Where'd your mother go? To repair her face and plot my future in some order. Madeline uncrossed her arms and then crossed them again, a woman who didn't know what to do with her hands. How much did you hear? So she knew he'd been on the terrace. Of course she knew. Enough, Jordan said. I heard enough. Then you heard me say, I heard you say it. He kept his voice quiet. When you didn't know I was listening. When there was nobody to say it for. That's the version I'll remember. Madeline opened her mouth to answer, but she never got the chance, because at that moment, a small silver bell was ringing somewhere near the ballroom's far end, and a caterer was moving through with a tray of filled champagne flutes, and the string quartet had stopped, and Victoria Parker's voice, perfectly warm now, perfectly recovered the face-repaired rose over the crowd. If everyone would gather, please. We'd like to say a few words for Andrew and Claire. Here we go, Madeline murmured. This is the part she's been building to all night. I can feel it. Stay close. I'm not going anywhere. They moved with the crowd toward the center of the ballroom, where Andrew and Claire stood flushed and slightly embarrassed under the chandeliers, and Victoria took a flute from a passing tray and lifted it, and the room fell into the hush that money commands without asking. Thank you all for being here, Victoria began. For Andrew and for Claire, who we're so pleased to welcome. Andrew, you've chosen well, and you've chosen wisely, and those aren't always the same thing. Warm laughter. In this family, we believe those two things should go together. That love and good sense belong at the same table. That the heart and the head can be partners. She let her gaze travel the room, and Jordan watched it travel, watched it hunt, and he knew where it was going to land a full second before it landed on her daughter. We believe that a good match is one that makes both people more, not less. That lifts, that builds, that honors where we come from while it reaches for where we're going. She's doing it, Madeline breathed. She's actually doing it. And on that note, Victoria continued smoothly, I have a small announcement of my own, if Andrew will forgive his mother one moment of the spotlight. We've had some wonderful news this week. A dear friend of this family, a young man many of you have known since he was in short pants, has accepted a very significant executive appointment right here in Chicago. He's coming home to us. Preston, don't be shy. Stand up, Preston Caldwell, everyone. The applause was immediate and warm, and Preston rose from his seat with a modest hand raised, playing the reluctant honoree to perfection, and Jordan felt Madeline go rigid beside him. Preston's return. Victoria went on over the applause, her eyes finding Madeline's and holding them. Reminds me that this family has a gift for second chances. That some things, some people are worth circling back to. That old misunderstandings have a way of resolving themselves when everyone finally comes to their senses. She raised her glass higher. To Andrew and Claire, and to homecomings, and to good sense finally winning out. Cheers. The room drank. Madeline did not. She turned my brother's engagement into a commercial for Preston, Madeline said low and shaking, staring at her mother across the sea of raised glasses. In front of 200 people, she just stood up and told everyone I'm going to end up with him, like it's decided, like I'm a merger. Then, undecided, Jordan said quietly. You've got the floor now whether she gave it to you or not, but not for me. Do it because it's true, or don't do it. Before Madeline could answer, Preston was there, having crossed the room during the toast with a full glass and that unhurried entitled ease, and he touched Madeline's elbow, drawing her a half step aside, though not far enough that Jordan couldn't hear. Can we talk? Preston kept his voice low and reasonable, the voice of a man being magnanimous. Just for a minute, somewhere quieter, for old times. Whatever you want to say, Preston, you can say it here. All right. He glanced at Jordan and then dismissed him with the smallest possible motion of his eyes, turning his shoulder to cut him out of the conversation. I'll say it here then. Madeline, look at yourself. Look at what you're doing. You brought a work colleague to your brother's engagement to make a point, and you made it. Congratulations. Your mother's beside herself. Mission accomplished. But the point is made. You can stop now. His voice dropped further, intimate and certain. This isn't you. A single father from Bronzeville, a ready-made family, someone else's grief to manage someone else's child to raise Madeline. That's not a life, that's a sentence. You'd be signing away everything you've built to play stepmother to a kid who isn't yours in an apartment you'd never have chosen. In a year the shine wears off, and you're just tired and trapped, and you resent all of it, and it's too late. I've watched it happen to women like you. Don't let it happen to you. Jordan didn't move. He'd promised her he wouldn't reach first, wouldn't step in front unless she asked, and this was hers to answer. So he held still, and he let her answer it. Women like me, Madeline repeated. You know what I mean. I really don't. Her voice had gone dangerously even. But let me answer the part about Ava, because that's the part you keep stepping on, and I want to be sure you hear me. You called her someone else's child, a kid who isn't mine, a sentence. She took a step toward him, and Preston, for all his poise, took a half step back. That little girl has more honesty in her than every single person in this room combined, and that includes you, and it very much includes my mother, and tonight it might even include me. She made her father a bracelet so strangers would be kind to him. She figured out at 8 years old that the world might not be kind to a good man, and she tried to fix it with beads and a piece of string. Madeline's voice cracked and held. You've been trying to make me smaller for 4 years, Preston, and you did it so gently I thanked you for it. And I sat across from that child tonight, and I watched her make her father bigger with a bracelet, and I thought, that's it. That's the whole difference. That's everything I needed to know about which of you I'd rather be near. Preston's easy face finally hardened. The magnanimity dropped away, and something colder came up underneath it. You want to know the truth about your Jordan? He said the name like it tasted bad. Because I did a little homework, Madeline, the way any sensible person would before letting someone into their family. Your operations analyst. Your great undervalued genius. He pitched his voice up just slightly. Just enough that the nearest clusters of guests could hear, was passed over for promotion 3 weeks ago. Passed over. Again. Not by racists, not by some conspiracy, just by the ordinary judgment of the people who work with him every day, who looked at him and decided, no. So spare me the story about the noble black man the system keeps down. Maybe the system looked at him clearly. Maybe you chose him precisely because he's beneath you, and safe and grateful, because you're too frightened of a real equal to stand next to one. Maybe that's the actual story here. The words carried. Heads turned. The little bubble of privacy popped, and suddenly the exchange had an audience, faces angling in the delicious hush of a scene about to happen. And Jordan understood in that moment that the performance was over. Not because he was angry he'd been called worse by better, but because Preston had, just in front of a crowd, tried to use Jordan as a weapon against Madeline, tried to turn Jordan's own life into the knife he'd stick in her, and that Jordan would not allow. Whatever this had been, whatever came next, he would not let himself be the thing that made her smaller in her own family's house. That's true, Jordan said. The word cut through the gathering murmur and stopped it. Preston turned surprised. Madeline turned alarmed. The promotion. Jordan's voice was level, and it carried without his raising it. He's right. I was passed over 3 weeks ago. Second time in 2 years. That part's true. He held Preston's eyes, and then deliberately, he turned to face the wider ring of listeners, because if there was going to be an audience, he'd rather speak to it directly than let it whisper. And here's something else that's true, since we're doing homework in public. This afternoon at 5:38. Madeline came to my desk and asked me to be her boyfriend for tonight. To pretend. Because her mother's been pushing Preston at her for 8 months, and she needed a shield. He let it land, let the whole room hear it, felt Madeline go white beside him. So there's your scandal, folks. It started as a lie. She hired me this afternoon. There's your headline. Go ahead and pass it around. The room erupted, not loudly. This was not a room that erupted loudly, but in a rush of whispers that swept outward like a dropped stone, guest to guest, hand to mouth. Victoria near the front closed her eyes with the look of a woman who'd been proven right about everything. Preston's mouth curved into a slow, triumphant smile. And Madeline. Madeline stared at Jordan with a face full of pure betrayal, the color gone out of it. Her eyes bright and stunned because she thought he'd just abandoned her, thought he'd chosen this moment to save himself and thrown her to the room to do it. Jordan. I'm not done. He said it to her gently, and then to the room harder. I'm not done. You got the fun part. Now you get the rest, and you're going to stand there and hear the rest because I've stood in a lot of rooms and swallowed a lot, and tonight, I'm not swallowing anything. He turned in a slow half circle, taking them all in, the aunts, the uncles, the board members, the strangers, doing math. It started as a lie, Jordan said. That part's true. But everything I've felt in this house tonight has been real, and I'm about to tell you which is which, so nobody has to whisper about it later. When I said yes this afternoon, I gave her one condition. 1. That if I came here, she'd introduce the real me, a single father, a widower, a man who started at a city college and rode the train to work today, and that she wouldn't hide any of it and wouldn't stay quiet if anybody in this house tried to make me small. That was the deal. He looked at Madeline. And she kept it. Every minute of tonight she kept it. She corrected her uncle when he thought I mopped floors. She told the truth about how the firm robbed my work, even though it embarrassed her to admit she'd watched it happen. And an hour ago, on that terrace, when she didn't know I could hear her, she told her own mother, the only mother she's got, that if you disrespect my daughter, you disrespect her. When there was no audience. When it cost her everything and won her nothing. That's who your Madeline is when nobody's keeping score. The whispers had stopped. The room was listening now, all of it. You want to know who she really is, since Preston's so eager to tell you who I am. Jordan's voice gentled, and somehow that made it carry further. She's the woman who stays late, so a scared junior designer doesn't have to be alone in the building with a partner who frightens her. She knows the names of every security guard downstairs and their kids' names. She sent a whole week of groceries to a coworker after surgery and lied and called it a company benefit, so the woman wouldn't feel like a charity case. None of you know that woman because she spent her whole life in here being the version of herself you'd approve of. But I've watched her for 2 years, and that's the real one. Not the merger your mother's trying to arrange. Not the trophy Preston wants back on the shelf. That one. The one who gives things away when no one's looking. He turned back to Madeline, and now his voice was only for her, though the whole silent room leaned in to catch it. I told the truth about the lie because Preston tried to use me to cut you, Jordan said. He wanted to stand here and turn my life into proof that you're a coward. And I wasn't going to let one more person in this house make you smaller, not even by making me the knife. So I put it on the table myself. All of it. Because the respect I feel for you is real, Madeline. It was real before tonight, and it got realer every hour we were in this house. And I would rather stand here having told the whole truth and lost you than keep one comfortable lie and watch them talk you back into a cage. Madeline's eyes had filled. Why didn't you ever tell me? She said, and it came out cracked. 2 years. Why did you never say one word about how you felt? Because I've got a daughter. Jordan's throat worked. Because loving somebody isn't just two people when you've got an 8-year-old watching to see who you let in the door. Nia's death taught me that love has a cost that lands on more than just me. If I let you into my life, I let you into Ava's, and I couldn't gamble her heart on a maybe just because I was lonely on the nights she's asleep and the apartment's quiet. He shook his head slowly. I wasn't scared of you turning me down, Madeline. I was scared of the morning after that, of a little girl asking where you went. So I said nothing. For 2 years. That was the coward's part, and it was mine, not yours. For a long moment, Madeline just looked at him, and the whole gilded room held its breath, waiting to see what a Parker would do. Then she started to talk, and her voice came out low and steady, and meant for him, though she let it carry, because she was done being quiet in this house. I chose you this afternoon, Madeline said, and I told you it was because you're calm and you're smart, and you wouldn't embarrass me. That was the resume. Here's the truth, since we're only telling the truth now. She took a breath. I chose you because you are the only man I've ever known that I don't have to perform for. Do you understand what that is for someone raised in this house? Every room I've ever walked into, I've been calculating what to wear, what to say, whose ego to stroke, which version of myself keeps the peace. My whole life is a performance. And 2 years ago, they sat a man down across from me who didn't want any version of me except the real one, who didn't even seem to notice the performance, and I could breathe for the first time. Voice broke and steadied. I didn't ask you here to make Preston jealous. I don't care if Preston is jealous. I asked you here because for one night, I wanted to stand next to the one person on this earth who sees me, actually sees me, and I told myself it was a scheme, so I wouldn't have to admit it was the truest thing I've ever wanted. Victoria's voice cut across the room, brittle and rising. Madeline, that is enough. You've humiliated yourself and this family quite enough for one evening. Whatever this spectacle is, you will end it now. Send the man home. We'll speak in the morning when you've come to your... Take it off, would you, Jordan? Madeline's hand had gone to her own throat, to the heavy diamond necklace that lay against her collarbone, the one Jordan had watched her mother fasten on her earlier in the evening with proprietary hands. Take what off? Jordan said. Nothing. I've got it. Her fingers found the clasp. She unhooked it, and she drew the necklace off, and she held it up so it caught the chandelier light, and threw it around a small cold fire in her palm. Then she turned and set it down on the nearest table, deliberately in front of 200 witnesses, the way you set down something that was never really yours. Mother Madeline said, I'm taking the Seattle position. The room made a sound. Victoria went the color of paper. The firm offered me the lead on the new Seattle division 4 months ago, Madeline said to the room, now clear and unhurried. Head of the whole West Coast operation, my own division to build. And I said I'd think about it, and I've been thinking about it, and do you know why I hadn't said yes? Because it would take me away from Chicago. Away from you. Away from the life you built for me here, the one with Preston penciled into the last chapter. I've been turning down the best opportunity of my career to stay inside the cage, because the cage is the only home I've ever known, and I was afraid to leave it. She lifted her chin. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm taking Seattle. I'm going to go build something that's mine, that has my name on the deck, that no partner gets to stand up and steal. I'm done making myself smaller so the rest of you feel comfortable. She left the necklace on the table and turned her back on it and on her mother, and she crossed the small distance to Jordan, and she stopped in front of him close enough that he could see her hands were shaking again, the way they'd shaken at his desk at 5:38. And I don't want you to be my fake boyfriend anymore, she said. For one terrible second. Even now. Even after everything. Jordan felt the floor go out from under him, felt certain. She was ending it here in front of all of them, letting him go the same public way she'd let go of the necklace. Then she stepped closer still. I want the chance to earn a real place in your life, Madeline said, so quiet now it was almost only breath only for him. And in Ava's. A real one. Slow and honest and on your terms. And Ava's terms however long it takes and whatever the rules are. I don't want the performance. I've had a lifetime of the performance. I want the thing that's true. Her eyes searched his. But only if you'll let me. I know what I'm asking. I know there's a little girl who gets a vote and she should. I'm not asking you to promise me anything tonight. I'm asking you to let me try. That's all. Just let me try. Jordan looked at this woman who had just in the space of 10 minutes told the truth to a room she'd spent her whole life lying to set down a fortune's worth of diamonds, like it was nothing chosen. A city 2,000 miles away over her mother's blessing, and then asked him. Asked, not assumed, for the chance to be careful with his daughter's heart. He didn't answer with words. He lifted his hand, the one with the crooked bracelet on the wrist, and he laid it gently along the side of her face, and she leaned into it and closed her eyes. And then she rose up and kissed him. Not for the room, not for Preston, not to wound her mother, but because for the first time all night, all year, she was doing exactly what she wanted to do, and nothing else. The room dissolved into noise around them. Somewhere Victoria was saying her name in a voice climbing toward hysteria. Somewhere Preston was setting down his glass and walking out. Andrew near the front was grinning like a man watching his sister come back to life. None of it reached them. When they finally broke apart, Jordan kept his hand against her face and pressed his forehead to hers, and in the middle of all that chaos he said, the only thing that mattered low just for the two of them. We're going to do this right, he said. Slow, honest. Ava sets the pace, not us. There's going to be a hard conversation tomorrow at a cafe with terrible coffee, and it's not going to be like tonight. No audience, no drama, just the truth about how hard this actually is. I know, Madeline whispered. It's going to be work. Real work. Distance and schedules and a kid who's going to test you to see if you'll leave. I know, she said again. I want the work. I've never wanted anything real in my life. Let me want this. And on his wrist, catching the light of 200 chandeliers, the backwards D turned face up between them, exactly where an 8-year-old girl had fixed it hours before, so that people would be kind to her father, and for once in that impossible house someone was. The cafe. Jordan picked the next morning had cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the previous administration, and that was exactly why he'd picked it. He was already in a booth by the window when Madeline came in, and he watched her scan the room and find him and cross to him, and he noticed she'd dressed down jeans, a plain sweater, her hair pulled back, and that she looked younger for it, and less armored, and more like the person he'd been trying to talk to for 2 years. You found the worst coffee in Chicago, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. On purpose, on purpose. He pushed a menu toward her. Last night was chandeliers, and 200 people, and a woman taking off a necklace like a movie. That's not real life. This is real life. Bad coffee and a Tuesday feeling on a Saturday, and figuring out if a thing works when nobody's watching. He looked at her steadily. So, no audience now. Just us. Let's find out what we actually said last night when we take the drama out of it. That's fair. Madeline wrapped both hands around the mug the waitress had already filled and grimaced at the first sip and set it down. You're right. That's genuinely terrible. Then quieter. I meant every word, Jordan. In case that's the question, under the question. I didn't do any of it for effect. I know it looked like a performance because it happened in the world's most performative room, but it wasn't. Taking Seattle. The necklace. Asking you to let me try. I meant all of it. I believe you. He turned his own mug slowly on the table. That's not what I'm worried about. I know you meant it last night. Last night's easy. Last night there's adrenaline, and there's a villain, and there's a whole ballroom watching you be brave. What I need to know is whether you'll still mean it on a Wednesday in February when Ava's got a fever, and I've been up since 4, and I cancel on you for the 3rd week running because that's just what being her father is. That's the test, not the ballroom, the Wednesdays. Madeline was quiet a moment. You keep bringing it back to her. I'm always going to bring it back to her. He said it without apology. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. I told you last night when you love somebody who's got a kid, it was never going to be 2 people. It's 3. And 2 of us are adults who can take a risk and survive it going wrong. And one of us is 8, and already buried her mother, and I will not let that one get hurt, because 2 grown-ups got swept up in a good story. He leaned forward. So before we go 1 inch further, I need you to hear the hard part, and I need you to not flinch when I say it. Say it. There's a real chance this doesn't work. Jordan held her eyes. You're about to move 2,000 miles away for at least a year. I'm about to fight the biggest fight of my career, and probably blow up my whole situation at the firm doing it, and I'm doing all of it while being the only parent a little girl has. That's a lot of ways for this to break. And if it breaks, it can't break on Ava. Which means we go slow. Slower than you'll want to. She doesn't meet you as my girlfriend for a while. She meets you as my friend Madeline, the one who got on the floor for her bracelet. We don't let her build a whole future around you until we're sure there's a future to build. Because if she lets you in, and then you're gone, that's not a breakup for her. That's another loss. And she's had her lifetime allotment of those already. Madeline's eyes were wet, but she didn't look away, and she didn't flinch. Okay, she said. Slow. Her pace. I meant that last night, and I mean it more this morning. She turned her mug again. There's something I have to tell you, though, and you're not going to love the timing of it. Tell me. Seattle starts in 2 months. She said it fast like ripping tape. And it's a year, minimum. Probably longer if it goes well, and I'm going to make it go well. So I'm asking you to let me try to earn a place in your daughter's life at the exact moment I'm about to leave for a year. She spread her hands. I heard it out loud just now. I know how it sounds. It sounds insane. It sounds like the worst possible foundation for the thing you just described. Go slow, protect the kid. And by the way, I'm leaving in 8 weeks. I know. Jordan sat back. He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that she started to fill the silence, and he held up a hand to stop her, because he wanted to say the next thing carefully and get it right. I want you to take it, he said. Madeline blinked. What? Seattle. I want you to take it. Go. Jordan, I already said I'm taking it. I took off the necklace in front of God and everybody. I know you took it. I'm telling you I'm glad. He leaned in. Listen to me because this is important, and I need you to actually hear it and not hear something else. When you stood up last night and said you were done making yourself smaller, that's the whole reason I want anything to do with you. That right there. So the fastest way to lose me would be to turn around 8 weeks later and make yourself smaller for me. To turn down the thing that's yours because a man came along. If you do that, then I didn't fall for the woman who took off the necklace. I fell for a woman who'd give up her whole self the second somebody asked, and that woman I don't want, because that woman breaks in 5 years and blames me for the breaking. His voice was rough now. I don't want you to stay. I want you to go be the biggest version of yourself there is in Seattle with your name on the deck. And I want to figure out how to love you across 2,000 miles while you do it. That's harder than asking you to stay. I know it's harder. I'm asking for the harder thing on purpose. For a moment, Madeline couldn't speak. Then she said, unsteady, I thought you were about to break up with me, just now, when you went quiet. I thought you knew me better than that by now. I've known you 2 years, and I'm learning I didn't know you at all. She pressed the back of her hand quickly to her eye. Every time I brace for you to do the small thing, the safe thing you do, the enormous thing instead. My whole life is people doing the small thing in a nice voice. I don't know what to do with a man who keeps doing the enormous thing. Get used to it, Jordan said, and almost smiled. It's mostly what I've got. But then his face changed, and he looked down at his coffee, and Madeline saw something cross it that she was learning to read. There's a version of me you don't know yet either, Jordan said, and you should know it before you sign up. I'm about to do something at work and it might blow up my whole life. She waited. The promotion Preston threw in my face last night, that was the second time. Second time in 2 years I did the work of a director, and they gave me the title and pay of an analyst and a pat on the back and told me to be patient. He turned the mug. I've been patient for 6 years. Patience done. I'm going in Monday, and I'm putting it all on the table, every project I saved, every number I moved, every time they took my work and put someone else's name on it. I've got it documented, all of it. I'm going to the board directly over the partners' heads, and they're either going to make it right or you walk. Or I walk, Jordan agreed. And walking means no salary, while I figure out what's next with a kid, and a rent, and a college fund I've sworn I'll never touch. So the man sitting across from you might be unemployed by Friday. That's the version of me you're signing up to try to love from Seattle. I need you to have all the information before you decide anything, the same way I gave you my whole card last night. Madeline was quiet, and then she reached across the sticky table and put her hand over his. Then let me help, she started. I could talk to. No. He said it gently, but there was iron under it. That's the one thing you can't do, and I need you to understand why. If you swoop in, if you pull a string, if a Parker makes a call, and suddenly Jordan Hayes gets his promotion, then it's not mine, it's yours. And I spend the rest of my life as the guy whose rich girlfriend fixed his career, and Ava grows up watching her daddy be handed things, instead of earning them, and that's not the man I'm trying to raise her to expect. He turned his hand over under hers and held it. I don't need you to rescue me, Madeline. I've never needed rescuing. I've needed to be seen, which is different, and you do that, and it's enough. Cheer for me. Believe me when I doubt myself at 11 at night. But let me win it myself, or let me lose it myself, please. She looked at him a long moment, and he watched her fight the instinct. The Parker instinct. The fix-it-with-money instinct. The instinct. Her whole world ran on, and he watched her win. Okay, she said. I won't touch it. It's yours. Win it or lose it. It's yours, and I'll be the loudest voice in Seattle cheering either way. She squeezed his hand. But you have to let me do the other thing. The 11 at night thing. When you doubt yourself. You don't get to be the fortress with me, Jordan. Your sister told me last night you act like a fortress and you're not one. So you don't get to fortress me. If it's a bad night, you call. That's my one condition. You gave me one at your desk. That's mine. Jordan looked at her, and something in his chest loosened that had been clenched for 4 years. Deal, he said. That's a fair condition. Deal. They stayed in that booth for 3 hours, and it was, Jordan thought later, the most important date of his life, precisely because it looked like nothing. No chandeliers, no drama. Just two people mapping out the truth of a hard thing over the worst coffee in Chicago. Figuring out where the walls were and where the doors were, being more honest with each other than either of them had been with anyone in years. The slow part came next, and the slow part was harder than the ballroom, because the slow part didn't have any adrenaline in it. It had only patience. Madeline didn't come back into Ava's life as anyone's girlfriend. She came back as Jordan's friend Madeline, and she came carefully, and she let the 8-year-old set every term. The first time was a school art fair 3 weeks later, a low-stakes public place, Jordan's call somewhere. Ava could ignore her if she wanted to. Madeline showed up in jeans again and spent 40 minutes taking Ava's crayon drawings as seriously as she'd take a client's blueprints, and asked real questions about them, and didn't once perform warmth she didn't feel because Jordan had warned her and she'd listened. That one's the storm, Ava told her, pointing at a chaos of blue and gray. From when the lights went out at Aunt Denise's. Daddy did shadow puppets on the phone. He told me about that, Madeline said. He said your mom used to do shadow puppets when the power went out. Ava went very still, the way she did around anything to do with her mother, watching to see how the grown-up would handle it. Jordan, a few feet away, pretending to study a papier-mâché volcano, held his breath. Did she really? Ava asked. You knew my mom. No, baby. I never got to meet her. I'm sorry I didn't. Madeline crouched down to Ava's level, the way she had that first night. But your dad told me she made the dog look like a duck every single time, and that she could make a scared kid laugh in about 11 seconds. She looked at the drawing. She sounds like she was really something. She was the best one, Ava said simply. Better than the shadow puppets. I bet she was. And Jordan watched his daughter decide that this grown woman had passed some test, had not tried to be her mother, had not gotten weird about the dead mother, had just told the plain truth, and let the plainness of it be enough, and he had to turn and look very hard at the papier-mâché volcano for a moment, so nobody would see his face. It went like that in small, careful steps over weeks. Madeline helped Ava build a model city for a school project, and she was good at it. Actually good, an architect's eye, bent down to a third grader's diorama, and she never took the project over the way adults did. Just handed Ava the pieces and let her decide where the buildings went. She learned Ava's rules, that you knocked before the bedroom, that the green cup was the only acceptable cup, that certain questions about Nia could be asked, and certain ones couldn't, and you had to feel out which was which by the set of Ava's shoulders. She got it wrong sometimes. She got it right more than she got it wrong. But Ava was cautious and stayed cautious because Ava was smart. And one afternoon, near the end of the 2 months, while Madeline was helping her glue a tiny cardboard bridge, the 8-year-old asked the question she'd clearly been holding. Are you going to disappear when you move to Seattle? Madeline's hands went still on the bridge. Jordan in the kitchen doorway went still too. He'd wondered how she'd handle it. The easy thing, the thing every adult reached for, was the reassuring lie. Of course not, sweetheart. I'll always be here. Nothing's going to change. He'd have understood if she'd reached for it. He almost hoped she wouldn't, and braced in case she did. She didn't. I can't promise you that nothing's going to change, Madeline said, and she said it looking Ava right in the eye, adult to kid, no sugar on it. That would be a lie, and you'd know it was a lie because you're the smartest person in this apartment, and your dad told me you can always tell. Things are going to change. I'm going to be far away, and there'll be weeks I can't visit and phone calls that get cut short, and it's going to be harder than any of us want it to be. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it'll be easy. She set down the glue. But here's what I can promise you, and I'll never break it. I will not disappear without telling you the truth first. If something changes, if I have to go, if this gets too hard, Anything you will hear it from me to your face, the honest version. I will never just vanish on you and leave you wondering what you did. You've had enough of people disappearing. I won't be one that does it in the dark." Ava studied her for a long, long moment, the whole weight of her small, careful judgment brought to bear. And then she picked the glue back up and handed it over. "Okay," Ava said. "Hold the bridge, it keeps falling." And that was it. That was the whole thing. Jordan in the doorway understood that his daughter had just extended more trust than she'd given anyone outside blood in 4 years. And that she'd done it because Madeline had refused to make her a promise instead of making her a real one. He gripped the doorframe and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't ruin it. Later after. Ava was asleep. Madeline found him at the kitchen table and sat down across from him, and neither of them spoke for a while. "She handed you the glue," Jordan finally said. "She handed me the glue. You have no idea what you just did. That's Madeline. She doesn't do that. She hasn't done that with anybody. The refusing to promise thing. I don't know how you knew." "I didn't know," Madeline said. "I just thought about what I'd have wanted at 8 from an adult. And it wasn't a promise. Everybody in my life made me promises. What I wanted was one person who'd tell me the truth even when it was bad." She looked at her hands. "I never got that one, so I figured I'd try to be it." Jordan reached across the table and took her hand. And this time, it wasn't an anchor, and it wasn't a performance for anyone. It was just his hand and hers on a scarred kitchen table at 9 at night in a 2-bedroom in Bronzeville. The Monday of the promotion fight had come and gone in the middle of all this, and it had gone the way Jordan had feared it might. He'd gone to the board with his documentation laid out, 6 years of taken credit and blocked advancement, and made his case as clean and undeniable as a spreadsheet. And the board had listened and nodded and praised him. Praised him warmly, praised him at length, and offered him a new title with a slightly better business card and no real authority, and a raise that didn't come close to matching the work. More patients dressed up in a nicer suit. The oldest trick in the building. He'd called Madeline that night at 11, keeping his condition, not fortressing her. "They gave me a title and no teeth," he'd said into the dark. "Senior something. It's the same job with a longer name. I sat there, and I almost took it, Madeline, because I've got a kid and a rent, and taking it is safe, and I'm so tired of being brave." "What did you do?" I asked for the night to think. He'd exhaled. "But I already know. I've known for a while. I can't keep working somewhere that only ever offers me a longer name. I think I have to walk. And I'm terrified because walking means no floor under me, and a daughter standing on the same floor." And Madeline, 2 months from Seattle, had not offered to fix it, had not offered a dime, had done the harder and better thing. "I can't tell you whether to walk," she'd said. "That's yours. But I can tell you what I see from here. I see a man who spent 6 years proving he's twice as good and getting half as much. And I see a company that's told you clearly twice now that they will never actually pay you what you're worth, because they don't have to. So the question isn't really whether to walk. The question is how many more years you want to spend teaching Ava that this is what a good man settles for. That's the only question. And you already know the answer, or you wouldn't have called it terrifying." There'd been a long silence on the line. "Yeah," Jordan had said finally. "Yeah, I know the answer." He'd walked that Friday. Handed in his resignation, cleaned out his desk, took the train home with a box on his lap and his stomach in his shoes. And then, instead of drowning, he'd called 2 former colleagues, a project manager named Reyes and a finance guy named Okonkwo, both of whom had watched the firm undervalue him for years, both of whom had said more than once that they'd follow him out the door if he ever built something, and he'd said, "I'm building something, you in?" And they'd said yes. Both of them. Yes. Hayes Operations Consulting had exactly 3 employees, a shared office the size of a closet, 1 signed client, and a founder who lay awake most nights doing math. But it had his name on the door, and every dollar it made was one nobody could stand up in a boardroom and steal. "I want to be clear about one thing," he'd told Madeline, the 2 of them walking Ava home from school one of those last weeks, the little girl running ahead to jump in a puddle. "This company, it's going to be lean for a while. Maybe a long while. And I know you've got money, real money, the kind that could make my first 2 years easy. And I'm telling you now, you can't put a dime into it. Not a loan, not an investment, not a, don't worry about it, I've got the office rent. Nothing. Jordan. Nothing. He watched Ava splash. Because the day you fund it, it stops being the thing I built to prove. I didn't need anybody to hand me anything, and it becomes the thing my girlfriend bought me. And I'd rather run it into the ground on my own than run it into the sky on your money. Cheer for it. Believe in it. Send me a nice email when we land a client. But the checkbook stays closed. That's a hard line, and it's not going to move, and I need you to not be hurt by it. Madeline had watched Ava climb out of the puddle soaked to the knee and triumphant, and she'd been quiet a while. You know what's funny, she'd said finally. You think you're describing a limit, something I can't do. But you're the first person who's ever wanted something from me that isn't my family's money, or my family's name, or my family's connections. Everyone I've ever dated somewhere in the back of it wanted the Parker of it all. And you're standing here telling me the one thing I'm absolutely forbidden from giving you is the money. She'd laughed a little wet. Do you understand that's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me? Keep your money, Madeline. God, no one's ever said that to me in my life. Well, he'd almost smiled. Get used to it. The last hard thing before Seattle was Victoria. She didn't come around. Jordan hadn't expected her to, and told Madeline not to expect it either, that some people can't change on your schedule, and you can't hold your life still waiting for them. Victoria made her displeasure known in the Parker way. A cool silence, a pointed absence at a family dinner. Madeline hosted a remark relayed secondhand about throwing everything away. But something had shifted underneath, and the thing that shifted it was Andrew. Madeline told Jordan about it after still a little shaken by it. Andrew had gone to their mother. Andrew, the easy one, the peacemaker who never crossed her, and he'd said the thing none of them had ever said out loud. He told her. Madeline recounted sitting on Jordan's terrible couch with her feet tucked under her, that she's spent 30 years calling it love when it was control. That she did it to me, and she tried to do it to him, and the only reason he got out clean is that Claire came along and showed him the difference. He told her she was about to lose her daughter completely, not to Seattle, not to you, but to her own inability to let anyone she loves make a choice she didn't approve first. Madeline's voice was unsteady. My brother, who I've spent my whole life thinking was too soft to stand up to her. He stood up to her. For me. What did she say? Nothing. For 3 days, nothing. And then she called me. Madeline looked at her hands. She didn't apologize. That's not she doesn't have that in her yet, maybe ever. But she asked me about Seattle. Actual questions. What the role was, what I'd be building, whether the apartment had good light. Which for my mother is practically weeping and begging forgiveness. It's the closest she's come to seeing me as a person with a life instead of an asset with a schedule. She looked up. It's not enough. But it's not nothing. And I've decided I can live with a mother who's trying but hasn't gotten there as long as I'm not waiting on her permission to have my own life. That's the part I finally let go of. I stopped waiting for the permission. Even Preston in the end gave her something, though he'd never have called it that. She ran into him at the gallery, opening a few weeks before she left, and he'd had a glass of wine in him, and he'd said with a bitterness that was almost honest, You know what your mother never understood? You didn't leave me because you were afraid of commitment. Everybody's story was that you were commitment-phobic, flighty a runner. That was never it. He'd looked at his wine. You left because I only ever made room for my life and expected you to fold yourself into the corners of it. And this Jordan. I did the homework. I know exactly what he's worth on paper, which is nothing next to what I could give you. But he makes room for you. That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the only thing. He'd finished the wine. I never figured out how to make room for anybody. Good luck to you, Madeline. I mean it, which surprises me. She told Jordan about it that night, and he'd listened and said, Took some spine him saying that. Didn't cost him nothing. You'd give Preston Caldwell credit for spine? I'll give anybody credit for telling the truth when a lie would have felt better. Doesn't mean I'd have him over for dinner. And Madeline had laughed and leaned into him, and for a moment, the whole hard machinery of the coming distance felt like something they might actually survive. The morning she left for Seattle, the three of them went to the airport together because Ava had asked to come, and Ava's asking to come was its own kind of answer to a question nobody had said out loud. There were no chandeliers. There was a crowded terminal and a departures board and cheap airport coffee that was somehow worse than the cafes, and a little girl holding Madeline's hand at the security line, reluctant to let go. "You'll call?" Ava asked. "Not just Daddy. Me too. You especially," Madeline said, crouching down to her level one more time. "Fridays. We'll do a Friday call, just you and me, and you can tell me about the whole week and which cup you're mad at." Ava's mouth twitched. "And if I ever have to miss a Friday, I'll tell you before, and I'll tell you why. Because you don't disappear in the dark," Ava finished. Madeline's composure cracked just slightly. "That's right, because I don't disappear in the dark." She hugged the little girl and stood and turned to Jordan, and for a second neither of them knew what to do with the enormousness of it, the year ahead, the 2,000 miles, all of it standing between this hug and the next one. "This is going to be hard," Jordan said. "I'm not going to pretend it won't be. I don't want you to pretend anything. That was always the whole point of you." Madeline pressed her forehead to his, the way he'd done at the party. "Fridays with Ava. And you call me at 11 when it's a bad night. And we tell each other the truth, even when the truth is, this is harder than I thought, and I don't know if we can do it. Especially then." "Especially then," he agreed. She kissed him quick and hard, and hugged Ava one more time, and then she was through the security line and gone, turning once to wave the way she'd waved up at Denise's window that first night, waving until the crowd swallowed her. Ava slipped her hand into her father's as they watched the empty space where Madeline had been. "Daddy," she said. "Is she your real girlfriend now, not the pretend one from the party?" Jordan looked down at his daughter, and then out at the terminal, at all the people leaving and arriving at the ordinary enormous business of loving somebody across a distance. "Yeah, baby," he said. "She's the real one now." "Good." Ava tugged him toward the exit. "I liked the pretend one, but I like the real one better. The real one told me the truth about the shadow puppets." And Jordan let his 8-year-old lead him out of the airport and into whatever came next, with no floor under his new company, and 2,000 miles opening up between him and the woman he loved, and not one single guarantee that any of it would work, and somehow for the first time in 4 years, feeling less like a fortress and more like a man who had finally at long last let the drawbridge down. The year that followed did not care about anybody's good intentions, and it tested every one of them. Hayes Operations Consulting started slow, the way Jordan had warned it would, and then 4 months in, it got worse before it got anywhere. The one signed client that had made the whole thing feel possible, a mid-sized developer who'd promised a year of steady work, got bought out, and the new owners brought their own people. And just like that, Jordan's flagship account was gone in a single phone call on a Tuesday morning. He sat in the closet-sized office with Reyes and Okonkwo and told them the truth, because he'd built the whole thing on telling the truth, that payroll was thin, that he could cover them for 2 months, and after that, he couldn't promise anything, and that he'd understand if either of them wanted to go back to something safe. Neither of them left. That was the thing Jordan would remember from the hard stretch, that when he handed 2 grown men a clean exit, both of them stayed. But staying didn't pay the rent, and the doubt came for him hard that winter, in the small hours the way it always came. He'd sit at the kitchen table after Ava was asleep with the numbers in front of him, and the old firm's offer would whisper at him. They'd take him back. Everyone knew they'd take him back longer, title and all, safe and warm and steady, and some nights the whisper was very loud. On one of the worst of those nights, he broke his own resistance and called Seattle at 11, keeping the condition she'd made him make. "I lost the Brennan account today," he said into the dark. "The buyout. It's gone. And I'm sitting here looking at these numbers, and I keep thinking about the offer to come back. Ava's college fund is sitting there, and I swore I'd never touch it. And I did the math tonight on how many months it'd buy me, and I hate that I did the math. I hate that I know the number." His voice was raw. "Tell me I'm not being a fool. Tell me I didn't blow up a stable life for a closet and 3 clients and a founder who can't sleep. There was a silence on the line, and in it he could hear her thinking, choosing her words, and he loved her for the fact that she didn't rush to comfort him with something soft and empty. "I'm not going to tell you you're not a fool," Madeline said finally. "Because some nights everybody who ever built anything is a fool, and you calling me at 11 to say so is the least foolish thing about you. But I'll tell you what I see." A breath. "You could go back tomorrow. You're right, they'd take you. And you'd have a floor under you again, and a longer title, and you'd spend the rest of your working life knowing you had one shot to build something with your own name on it, and you handed it back the first hard winter. And Ava would grow up watching her father teach her without ever saying a word that when it gets hard you fold. That's the actual cost of the safe thing. It was never the money. It was the lesson." Jordan was quiet. "You didn't blow up a stable life," Madeline said. "You walked out of a place that told you twice to your face that it would never pay you what you're worth. That's not instability. That's the opposite. The instability was staying somewhere that made you small enough to fit and calling it a floor." Her voice softened. "Lose the Brennan account. Lose 10 more. You'll land others. You're the best operations mind I've ever worked next to, and I've worked next to expensive ones. The winter's real. But the winter is not the verdict. Don't let a bad Tuesday become the whole story." He'd sat with the phone against his ear, the numbers still in front of him, and felt the whisper of the old firm's offer finally go quiet. "You didn't offer me a dime," he said. "No, and I'm not going to. You'd never forgive me, and you'd be right." He could hear her smile, tired and 2,000 miles away. "I offered you the other thing. Was it enough?" It was enough. And in the morning, Ava, who had heard more of the late-night call than he'd realized, appeared at breakfast and put her small hand flat on his arm and said with the terrible clarity of an 8-year-old, "You're not going to go back to the mean job, right? The one that took your work and gave it to the other guys." And when he asked how she knew about that, she said, "I always know, Daddy. You said leaving a place that doesn't respect you isn't losing. You said that to me. So you can't go back." And Jordan looked at his daughter, handing his own words back to him across a bowl of cereal. And he understood that the lesson Madeline was worried about had already been taught, and that Ava had learned the right one, and he never did the math on the college fund again. In Seattle, Madeline was learning her own version of the same lesson, and it was teaching her something about the man she'd left in Chicago that she could never have learned any other way. She'd walked into her new division, expecting the work to be the hard part. The work was the easy part. The hard part was the room the executives who'd smiled at her across the table, and she learned within a month, called her the diversity hire behind her back. The heiress. The Parker girl who got the corner office because of the name on the building's donor wall, not because she'd earned a thing. She sat in meetings where she'd propose something sharp and correct, and watch it get talked over, and then watch a man rephrase it badly 20 minutes later and get called a genius. She built things and watched other people's names go on the top of the deck. And one night on a Friday call, she told Jordan about it, and halfway through telling him she stopped because she heard what she was describing. "Oh my God," she said quietly. "This is it. This is what you've lived inside your whole career. I'm getting a taste of it. A sip the watered-down heiress version with a safety net under me the whole time, and it's making me insane after 4 months. And you did this for 6 years with a daughter to feed and no net at all." Her voice broke. "I used to admire how calm you were. I told you that at the party at my mother's table. I said I admired your composure, and I'd never noticed what the composure was covering. I still didn't get it. Not really. I get it now. The composure was you holding a whole building on your back and smiling so nobody could use the strain against you. Jordan, how did you not scream? How did you carry that and stay kind?" "You carry it because you've got somebody who needs you to," Jordan said. "That's the whole trick. There's no trick. You just decide the alternative, going bitter, going hard, letting it eat you, costs your kid more than the carrying costs you. So you carry it. And most days you don't even feel heroic about it. You just feel tired." A pause. "You're not supposed to have to learn this, Madeline. I'm sorry you're learning it. But I won't pretend I'm not a little bit glad somebody finally sees the actual shape of it. It gets lonely being the only one who knows what you're really lifting." "I see it," she said fiercely. "I see all of it, and I'm never going to unsee it. The distance did what distance does. There were missed calls and time zones that stole their evenings, and Fridays, where he was too wrung out to be good company, and Fridays where she was. There was a stretch in the spring where it got genuinely bad, where the loneliness curdled into something sharper on both ends, and the phone calls started to feel like obligations, and the silences on the line got long and wrong. It came to a head on a night when he called her frustrated about the business, and she was frustrated about her division, and neither of them had anything left to give the other, and the argument when it came was ugly. "You always do this," Jordan said, and his voice had an edge he didn't recognize. "The second things get hard here. You're distracted. You're in a meeting. You're too busy building your empire too. I'm drowning some weeks. Madeline and I call, and I get a woman who's already thinking about her 9 a.m. That is not fair." Her voice came back hot. "You want to talk about hiding? You hide behind Ava. Every time. Every single time we get close to something real about us, about you and me. You pull her in front of you like a shield. I can't be upset because Ava. I can't ask for more because Ava. I love that little girl, but don't you dare use her to keep me at arm's length whenever you get scared, because that's what you're doing and you know it." The silence after that was long and terrible, the worst one yet, 2,000 miles of it humming on the line. And then, because they were who they were, because they'd built the whole thing on a promise to tell the truth. Even when the truth was ugly, one of them stopped. "Okay," Jordan said, finally quiet now, the edge gone. "Stop, both of us. Stop." A breath. "You're right. That one landed because it's true. I do that. I put her in front of me when I'm scared, because it's easier to say I'm protecting my daughter than to say I'm terrified of needing you and having you 2,000 miles away where I can't reach you. That's the real thing under it. I hide behind her because the alternative is admitting I lie awake, needing somebody who could leave." There was a wet sound on the line, Madeline breathing. "And you were right too," she said unsteady. "About me. I do go to work the second it hurts, because work is the one place I've ever been able to control the outcome if I just try hard enough, and you us. I can't control this. I can't fix it with effort, and that terrifies me, so I run to the thing I can control. I'm not distracted because I don't care. I'm distracted because I care so much it scares me, and I don't know where to put it." Her voice cracked all the way. "We're the same. Look at us. We're the exact same. We're both so scared of needing someone who might leave that we'd rather push them away first and call it strength." "Yeah," Jordan said softly. "Yeah, that's exactly it." "So what do? We stop calling it strength." Jordan let out a long breath, and when he spoke again, something in him had come unlocked that had been locked since a funeral home 4 years back. "Here's the thing I've never said out loud to anybody, so let me get it out. Strength isn't me pretending I never need anything. That's not strength, that's just the fortress. And my sister's right, I've been living in it since Nia died, because a fortress can't lose anybody. But a fortress can't hold anybody either. So I need you. There. I need you, Madeline. Not as a rescue, not for your money, not for anything except that the days are better when I get to tell you about them, and worse when I don't. That's a need. I'm allowed to have it. I'm telling you I have it. And I need to learn," Madeline said, "that being independent doesn't mean turning down every hand somebody holds out. That I can build my own division and my own life, and still let you carry me on the nights I can't carry myself. And that doesn't make me my mother's kind of woman, the kind who disappears into a man. It makes me a person with someone. I've never let myself be a person with someone. I want to learn how." "Then we learn it together," Jordan said. "Across 2,000 miles badly, one Friday at a time." "Across 2,000 miles," she agreed. "Badly, together." They didn't break up that spring. They came out the other side of that ugly night closer than the drama of the ballroom had ever made them, because they'd found the real fault line running under both of them and named it out loud instead of letting it crack them apart in the dark. And after that, the Fridays got easier, and the silences got comfortable again, and the year turned toward summer, with the two of them still standing, still choosing it, one hard week at a time. By the time Andrew's wedding came around, a year almost to the week from the engagement party, where the whole thing had started, the winter had broken on both coasts. Hayes Operations Consulting had landed its first city contract in the early summer, a real one, a logistics overhaul for a municipal transit project that put the company's name on something that mattered and something permanent. Reyes cried a little in the closet office when the signed contract came through and pretended he hadn't, and Okonkwo bought a bottle of something they couldn't afford, and they drank it out of coffee mugs. Three men who'd bet on themselves, and for the first time watched the bet start to pay. It wasn't security yet. It was the first real proof that the walking away hadn't been a fool's move. It was enough. And in Seattle, Madeline had done what Madeline did. Once she stopped waiting for anyone's permission, she'd built the division into the best-performing new operation in the company, and the executives who'd called her the diversity hire had gone quiet, and then had gone to her for advice, and the company had come to her that summer, with an offer to make the Seattle role permanent. Head of the West Coast for good. Her name on it earned undeniable no donor wall involved. She flew back to Chicago for the wedding, with that offer sitting in her pocket, and she knew what her mother would make of it, and she was right. Victoria found her at the reception in a corner away from the dancing, and the two of them had the conversation that a year had been building toward. "They've made the Seattle position permanent," Victoria said. She'd heard, of course. She always heard. "Congratulations. It's a real achievement, Madeline. I want you to know I know that it's real." A pause, and something that cost her visibly. "I've watched what you built out there. I ask about it. I understand it now more than I did. You built something with your name on it, and no help from this family, and I—" She stopped and tried again. "I was wrong about a great deal. I'm not good at this, but I was wrong." It was not a full apology. Victoria did not have a full apology in her, maybe never would. But it was more than Madeline had ever gotten, and she took it for what it was. "Thank you, Mother. That means something. It does." Then Madeline squared herself for what she knew was coming. "But you're about to tell me I have to choose. Permanent Seattle or Jordan and Ava in Chicago. You've already done the math and decided I can't have both, and you're about to make me pick, and you're going to frame it as concern. I'm only saying that a permanent position 2,000 miles from a man and a child is not. Actually, it's not 2,000 miles. The voice was Jordan's, and he'd crossed the reception floor to stand beside Madeline, easy and steady. And Ava was with him in a good dress, with her braids done up, holding his hand. "Evening, Mrs. Parker," Jordan said. "It's good to see you." And he meant it plainly enough that Victoria didn't quite know what to do with it. "I hope you'll forgive me stepping in, but you were about to tell your daughter she has to choose between her career and us, and I wanted to be here to tell you she doesn't, because there's a piece of news that hasn't gotten to you yet." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What news?" "Hayes Operations is opening a West Coast office," Jordan said. "Seattle. We've got 2 clients out there already asking for us, and a third in the pipeline, and the numbers finally support the expansion. I've been working on it independently for 3 months. It's a real business opportunity. It stands on its own. It'd make sense to do, even if I'd never met your daughter, and I want that on the record, because I know how it looks, and I know how this family thinks." He glanced at Madeline, whose hand had come up to her mouth. "So Ava and I are moving to Seattle at the end of the school year. Not to follow Madeline, not to fold ourselves into her life, to build our own next to hers. There's a difference, and it matters, and I suspect you of all people understand exactly what the difference is." Madeline had gone very still. "You never told me any of this. I wanted it to be real first. I wasn't going to move my daughter across the country on a hope, and I wasn't going to dangle a maybe in front of you that I couldn't deliver. So I built it quiet the way I build everything, and I made sure it was real, and now it's real." He looked at her. "You built your thing. I built mine. And they happened to be building toward the same city. Nobody sacrificed anything. Nobody got smaller. We just both got bigger in the same direction at the same time. That's the whole thing we said we wanted that first morning over the terrible coffee. I went and made it true." For a moment, Madeline couldn't speak at all. And Victoria, watching the two of them, watching the little girl look up between them, seemed to understand at last that the thing she'd been trying to prevent all year was not a mistake her daughter was making, but a life. Her daughter was building the exact thing Victoria had always claimed to want, for her arriving in a shape she'd never approved and could no longer deny. "I see," Victoria said quietly. And then to Jordan, with a stiffness that was the closest her body knew how to come to grace. I owe you an apology, Mr. Hayes. From the party. From the things I said, and the things I implied about you and about your daughter. I was cruel, and I dressed it up as caution, and I've had a year to sit with it. She looked at Ava, and something in the old woman's face moved. I called this child a burden. In my own house. There's no version of that I can defend. Jordan let the apology sit a moment before he answered, because he wasn't going to make it cheap by catching it too fast. I accept it, Mrs. Parker, he said finally. I do. But I'll tell you the same thing I've told your daughter, and I say it with respect. An apology's a door, not a finish line. I'm not going to pretend the party didn't happen because you said a kind sentence a year later. Respect isn't a thing you say once. It's a thing you show over and over until the showing is just who you are. You show it to Ava consistently when it's easy and when it isn't, and you and I are going to be just fine. That's the deal. Same deal I've offered everybody in this story from the start. Come as your real self, treat my daughter right, and you'll never have a more loyal man in your corner. Fall short of it, and no amount of last names will move me. He extended his hand. But the door's open. I'll give you that gladly. Victoria looked at the offered hand, and then she took it, and for the first time in the whole year, she shook it like she meant it. Later, when the dancing had thinned, and the older guests had drifted off, and the string lights had come on in the garden, the same estate, a year and a lifetime from where it started. Madeline slipped away from the reception and found Jordan standing out there alone, under the lights exactly where she'd once recruited him for a single desperate evening. She came up beside him and slipped her hand into his. I still can't believe you built a whole West Coast office and didn't tell me, she said. 3 months. You sat on Friday calls with me and never said a word. I told you. I don't dangle maybes. Especially not at you. He squeezed her hand. You've had a lifetime of people promising you things to keep you in line. I wasn't going to be one more. I was going to hand you a done thing or hand you nothing. Madeline leaned her head against his shoulder, and for a while they stood in the quiet, listening to the music drift out from the house, watching the lights. You know what today is, she said. A year. Almost exactly. A year ago I walked up to your desk at 5:38 and told you I needed a boyfriend tonight, and you looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You had lost your mind. You still have. It's one of my favorite things about you. He turned to look at her. But you also did the bravest thing I've ever seen a person do that year. You blew up the whole life somebody built for you, and you built a real one from scratch, and you did it without ever once making yourself smaller to make anybody else comfortable. Not for your mother, not for Preston, not even for me. You never shrank for me, not once, and God knows I gave you chances to. That's the whole thing I fell for. You wouldn't shrink. She turned into him and looked up, and there was something mischievous under the tears in her eyes. Well, she said, since it's the anniversary, and since we're standing in the exact spot. She squared her shoulders in mock seriousness. Jordan Hayes, I still need a boyfriend tonight. Jordan looked down at her and let a slow smile come, the first fully unguarded one she'd maybe ever seen on him. Yeah. What's the emergency this time? No emergency. Her voice went soft, and the joke fell away from it. That's the difference. A year ago, it was an emergency, and a scheme, and a shield. There's no emergency now. No party to survive, no mother to manage, no Preston to fend off. There's nothing to solve. She pressed closer. I just want you. That's the whole reason. No agenda underneath it. For the first time in my entire life, I'm asking for something with nothing hiding behind it. I just want you, tonight and every night after it. Jordan reached up and laid his hand along the side of her face, the way he had a year ago in a chaotic ballroom, and she leaned into it the way she had then. You know, I've still got the one condition, he said. Madeline smiled, certain she knew it, ready to hear him say again what he'd said at his desk. That she respect his real self. That she honor his daughter. The condition that had started everything. I know, she said. Same as it ever was. Respect the real you. Ava comes first. I know it by heart, Jordan. I've lived it for a year. I'd say it in my sleep. No, Jordan said. New condition. And he let go of her hand, and he reached into his jacket pocket, and Madeline's breath caught as he drew out a small box and opened it, and the ring inside caught the garden lights and threw them back. Across the garden, half hidden by a hedge, but not hidden at all, because she'd been positioned there on purpose by prior arrangement with Denise's hand on her shoulder. Ava watched already grinning, because she'd been told about this days ago, because Jordan would no sooner have proposed without his daughter's blessing than he'd have stopped breathing, because the little girl had gotten her vote first, the way she got a vote in everything that mattered. "The new condition," Jordan said, his voice steady, though his hand was not quite, "is that we stop pretending temporary is ever going to be enough. No more one-night boyfriend. No more year at a time. No more slow. We've done slow and careful and honest, and we came out the far side of it still choosing each other on the worst Tuesdays there are. So here's my condition. Madeline Parker. Marry me. Make it permanent. Make it real. All the way real. The kind of real nobody gets to take off like a necklace. That's the condition. Take it or leave it." Madeline was crying and laughing. At once both hands pressed to her mouth, and across the garden, a little girl in braids had started jumping up and down. "That's a terrible condition," Madeline managed. "Completely non-negotiable. No room for a counteroffer at all." "None. It's a hard line. I told you my hard lines don't move." "Then yes." She dropped to her knees in the grass in front of him, so they were level, the way she'd once knelt for a bracelet, the way she'd knelt for a diorama, and took his face in both her hands. "Yes. To the condition. To the permanent. To all of it. To you and Ava and Seattle and the terrible coffee and the 11 o'clock phone calls for the rest of my life. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him down and kissed him. And this time, there was no room to play to, and no point to score, and no audience that mattered. Only a little girl, breaking free of her aunt's hand and sprinting across the garden to crash into both their legs at once, shouting something that was half a word and half pure joy. And the three of them tangled together in the grass under the string lights, laughing, a family that had built itself out of one ridiculous request and refused at every single turn to make any one of them smaller than they were. Long after, when Ava was grown and asked her father to tell the story of how it all started, Jordan would tell it the same way every time. "She asked me to be somebody else for one night," he'd say. "Some man she could hold up in that big house to make everyone believe she had her life in order. And I told her, no. I'd only do it if I could go as exactly who I was. The whole truth. Your grandmother's dead, and your daddy rides the train, and there's a little girl who comes before everything." And somehow that ridiculous, impossible request turned into the thing that made both of us honest for the first time in our lives. Love didn't erase what was different between us, baby. It never does, and don't let anybody sell you the version where it does. What it did was teach us how to stand in the middle of all those differences and face them together without either one of us ever having to become smaller, so the other one could feel safe. And that was the truth of it. Plain as the backwards letter on a child's homemade bracelet, and it held from that first desperate Friday to the last. They built a love that asked no one to disappear, and it was the realest thing either of them ever made.